As we continue to move forward with our knowledge of PHP, especially as we start getting closer to being ready to talk about control flow statements, there's a handful of new operators that I wanted to run through here briefly that are going to become important to us soon. Most of these operators, I would be willing to bet, are operators that you've probably dealt with before and are hopefully pretty comfortable with at this point, but I'm going to point them out and maybe show you just a few tricks about the ones that sometimes confuse people a little bit more. These new operators I want to tell you about can be split up into sort of four different categories. There are equality operators, which are used for checking to see if two things are equal or not equal. There are comparison operators that let us compare two values greater than, less than. There are logical operators, which can be used for combining together equality or comparison operations. And then there is the oddball, which is the comparison operator itself. As far as these different operators are concerned, they mostly all deal with Boolean values one way or another. So in the case of almost all these operators, we're going to be primarily talking about values that are true, values that are false, or those kinds of values are what are going to be produced whenever these different operators are used. Just to show you a quick example, the equality operator itself in PHP is the double equal sign, which you've probably run into before. We could do something like, say, echo 7 is equal to 7, and then I'm going to append onto that statement, I'm going to say 7 equals 7, and when I actually pull that up in my browser, I end up getting back a value of 1. Hopefully you remember from previously that when PHP is asked to echo a Boolean value, it always shows the number 1 whenever it's indicating true, and it'll show an empty, a false, a blank, whenever it's talking about false. So here when we see the 1, that's telling us that when we compare 7 equal to 7 with the equality operator, the double equal sign, the answer is coming back and saying true. If I were to change that to is 7 equal to 8, the answer comes back as false. So pretty much like you would expect. The triple equal sign, when I give it a try, if I take my little formula here and put it inside parentheses to keep the order of operations straight, if I try to compare 7 and 7 using the triple equal sign, the strict equality operator, the answer there comes back as true, as you can see. If I say, is 7 strictly equal to 8, the answer comes back as false. At that point, it seems like the strict equality operator is almost identical to the regular equality operator, but here's the difference. The regular equality operator, the double equal sign, will do type coercion. Basically, PHP will see if it can change the type of a piece of data in order to make them equal. So using the regular equality operator, if I said 7 the digit, is that equal to 7 the string, the answer in that case comes back as 1. If, on the other hand, I use the strict equality operator, the strict equality operator tells PHP, do not do any type coercion. Don't change the data type of anything. Simply, as these values are they equal to one another? And here the answer comes back as false. So 7 the digit is not equal to 7 the string. The not equal to versions of the equality and the not and the strict equality operators are pretty much just like what you would imagine. They simply reverse whatever the normal answer would be. So something that is equal would not be not equal. Something that is strictly equal would not be not strictly equal, as it goes. The comparison operators, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, hopefully everybody is pretty familiar with. Just to throw up a quick example of that so you can see it in action. Not a lot of action, but it's something. Let's say is 7 greater than 8. And I'll say 7 greater than 8. Got my semicolon. There we go. The answer comes back as false. No value being shown there right now. If, on the other hand, I would say is 7 greater than 6, the answer comes back as true. Right? Same basic idea is going to work with the less than, the greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Right? The logical operators, the double ampersand is the AND operator. PHP also allows us to actually use the word AND. The double pipe symbol is the OR operator, and PHP again also lets us use the word OR if we should happen to want to. So again, just to give you an idea of how that might look, if I said echo, let's see, what do I want to compare here? Let's say is 7 between 0 and 10. All right, so for this one, what I could do is inside a set of parentheses, I'm going to make another set of parentheses, and I'm going to say, is 7 greater than 0, and is 7 less than 10. So essentially I've used two comparison operators, one to check to see if 7 is greater than 0, that of course will be true or false. I'm also then checking to see if 7 is less than 10, that will be true or false. And the AND operator will then combine those two together using the rules of AND. And right now it comes back and tells me 1, so that is true. The rules of AND, of course, essentially mean that if both of the two parts are true, then the entire expression will be considered true. But if either of the two parts are false, then the entire expression will be considered false. If both parts are false, then the expression is false. And here in PHP, instead of using the double ampersand, you can use the word and you see it works exactly the same way. We can do the same basic thing with OR. The only real difference with OR is the rules that are involved. With the rules of OR, if either of the two parts are true, the expression is considered true. So essentially AND is difficult to satisfy where everything must be true. OR is much easier to satisfy where either of the two parts can be true. Finally, the last operator, the one I described before probably as being an oddball, is the comparison operator itself. It's how it's often referred to, it seems. That's the question mark colon. And the thing that makes it a bit of an oddball is that in PHP, and most modern languages actually, that's the only operator that is a trinary operator. All these other operators we worked with are binary, meaning they take two values, something on the left, something on the right. The comparison operator, that final oddball one, is a trinary operator. It takes three values, three operands, we would say, one on the left, one in the middle, and one on the right. So it's a little bit different. The way we typically work with the comparison operators, we start off by providing it with a Boolean expression, providing it with something that's going to be true or false. So virtually any of these other operators in use will work as the first operand to the comparison operator. So we could do something like, say, is 7 greater than 0, for example. I could then throw in the question mark. Then what I do is I tell it what I want to happen if it is true and what I want to happen if it is false. So maybe I'll say, as a string, 7 is greater. Then I put the colon, the second part of the operator, and then I'll put 7 is not greater. I'm going to throw an echo statement in on the front of that. And when I jump back over to my browser and refresh, I forgot my break there, but there's the basic output. Let me put a break in here so we can see that a little better. There, it's coming back and it's telling me 7 is greater. The way that works is that PHP is evaluating the first operand, the part to the left of the question mark, and determining whether that's true or false. If it finds that it's true, then the value of this entire operator becomes the value that's between the question mark and the colon. That's the true value. On the other hand, if the leftmost operand, 7 greater than 0, is not true, then the value of this entire expression becomes 7 is not greater. Whichever of those two values ends up becoming the value of the expression is what's actually then used by the echo. So if I say 7 is greater than 0, that is true. So this is what goes to the echo, and we output 7 is greater, and that's what we're getting there. If I were to come back and change my initial expression here to is 7 greater than 10, in that case that's going to be false. So 7 is not greater will become the value of the expression, and that's what will then be available to the echo in the browser. There it is, 7 is not greater. None of these operators are all that terribly exciting, I would imagine, on their own. But of course, when we actually end up putting them into practice, primarily when we start dealing with control flow statements, control structures of different types, if statements and loops and those sorts of things, then these operators really come into their own. The way that I'm using them here, where I'm just incorporating them into echo statements, is not the way that we will typically see these operators used. Obviously, they can be used this way. There's just not a lot of practical reason to do so. So we will see these operators, we will see them a lot, just not necessarily used the way that I'm using them here in this silly example. But I wanted to go ahead and put them out here before you so you would have a chance to look at them, think about them, bring them back to mind before we move on and they start becoming more important to us.